There you go, Libri Schifri, something inside, so strong. This morning, I'm going to be talking about someone called Marian Price. Now, before I start any further, I should point out, first, this show does not in any way support terrorism or any violence in any form. The piece we are about to discuss is about giving human rights to human beings. We feel people should be treated fairly within our prison system, and that's all. We don't support any terrorist acts. Let me tell you a little bit about this woman, Marian Price. Me and Mike talked about her on our radio show on Monday, and her lawyer rang us and said, could we discuss it? So I said, of course, and I'm hopefully going to ring him in a minute. Technology hopefully working. But this is what her lawyer, Simon Pook, sent me. Marian was arrested following an Easter commemorative in Derry and charged with encouraging support for an illegal organisation after holding a piece of paper up for a masked man. A common occurrence at Easter commemorations over the past 40 years, and one that until 2011 no one has ever been jailed or arrested for. On May 16, 2011, Marian appeared at Derry Court and was granted bail on a charge against her. As Marian reached the steps of the outside of the court, she was rearrested by the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland. The basis of the arrest was that on the night prior to her court hearing, the Secretary of State, Owen Paterson, signed a court document revoking the licence Marian was originally released on in 1980. It is an accepted fact that Marian's licence became defunct when she was pardoned under the Royal Prerogative of Mercy weeks after her release over 30 years ago. The pardon was issued by then Secretary of State Sir Humphrey Atkins, and in effect wiped clean the slate for Marian Price. The British authorities have claimed that the pardon granted to Marian has been shredded. On the 17th of February, Marian Price was moved onto the Health Care Centre at Hyde Bank Women's Prison after spending 10 months in isolation at Magavery, all-male prison. It is claimed that this move was a result of a clinical advice given by the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust. Juan Mendez, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, says indefinite and prolonged solitary confinement in excess of 15 days should be subject to absolute prohibition. Couldn't argue more with you, sir. Couldn't argue less with you. And considering the severe mental pain or suffering solitary confinement may cause, Mr. Mendez goes on to say, it can be amount to torture or cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment when used as a punishment during pre-trial detention indefinitely or for a prolonged period of time. Marian has been held in isolation for excess of 378 days. The United Nations Special Rapporteur and European Council Prevention of Torture are monitoring Marian's situation. Doctors from the United Nations have attended Marian on 3 occasions to examine her condition she is being held in and report on her health. It is accepted that Marian is not fit to stand trial due to the effects of being held in isolation. She has recently been moved to hospital days before the UN experts were due to revisit her. She is held under armed guard in her hospital bed. And we're talking about Great Britain here, Charlie. Yeah. It doesn't seem right. Well, enough of me gassing on. Why don't we give her lawyer a call? I hope technology is going to work. And in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with a song called Free Marian Price. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That was a song uploaded by someone called Rights and Justice. I don't know who sung it. But as I said, that's about Marian Price. And if technology is working, I've got her lawyer on the phone. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. Charlie, hang on, we've got another show going. Charlie. We always have this problem on the phone channel. There we go, we've got rid of the music.
That's great.
Can you hear me very well?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, would you like to introduce yourself and let our listeners know who I'm talking to?
Yes, my name's Simon Pook. I'm a human rights lawyer who's worked very closely with the Price family during her recent internment in Magavery in Northern Ireland.
Okay, so who is Marian Price?
Marian Price is a lady from Northern Ireland. She was convicted of terrorist offences in the 80s. Those offences included one was bombing the Old Bailey. She was sentenced to life and subsequently went on hunger strike for repatriation back to Northern Ireland. She was transferred. She spent over 368 days on hunger strike being force-fed. Due to that hunger strike, her health deteriorated so much so that Humphrey Atkins, the Secretary of State at that time, granted a royal pardon, prerogative of mercy. Marian was very, very close to death. Shortly after, it was about a week after granting the release, the pardon came into effect, which in effect quashed the life sentence, in addition to any licence that would have applied at that time. She has been out of prison in excess of 30 plus years, and about a year ago she attended a Republican event at Easter. These events take place across Ireland. A comment was read. She was arrested for holding a piece of paper. That charge has since been withdrawn. She was released by the Crown Court judge. She was granted bail. The Secretary of State initiated a recall of licence, and effectively she's been in prison for over a year. But I'll go back to say that in 1982, the royal prerogative quashed the licence. There is no licence to recall Marian on. So she is, in fact, interned.
Yeah, that sounds wrong. I mean, I don't know what other word. I mean, you say she was arrested for holding up a piece of paper. Is this some sort of major crime these days?
Not at all. She was at a Republican Easter commemoration. The Irish government have them. There are some constitutional parties within Northern Ireland who have these commemorations. People hold up pieces of paper. Marian, I don't want to go into details of that case because it may well prejudice, but other people hold these pieces of paper and they have not been imprisoned. I have to say that during the time she was held in Maghaberry, which is a all-male prison.
I saw that, yes.
The Secretary of State had a complete wing allocated for Marian. She was held in isolation for almost 9 months, despite the UN saying the conditions will have an impact on her well-being and indeed any human's well-being.
This sounds to me very much, I mean, to me it sounds this is some form of torture, surely.
We've argued that Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights does apply to Marian. Doctors from the United Nations have attended the facilities of which Marian is being held in. The Secretary of State transferred Marian from Maghaberry male prison to Hyde Bank.
Is that a female prison?
It's a female prison, but again, he transferred it into isolation. Her health further deteriorated. I myself have visited Marian, and I was very, very shocked, upset and disturbed at her condition, her physical condition and her mental condition.
Can I ask, why is she being held in isolation? I mean, is this a general punishment for people who in her case?
The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Owen Paterson, has not put forward a valid reason why. Instead, what is happening, Marian has been now moved again because doctors from the United Nations went into Hyde Bank to look at the conditions and to assess Marian's well-being, particularly having in mind Article 3 of the European Convention, not to be subjected to inhuman conditions or torture. The Secretary of State then agreed to move Marian under medical advice to a hospital only 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Marian is now held under armed guard in a hospital that is a civilian hospital. We have a woman who is approaching 60 years of age it's important to put this into context. This is a woman of 60 years of age with significant health conditions, and she has the impact of the isolation to deal with.
Is she known to be violent? I mean, I'm trying to justify in my head why she needs an armed guard. I mean, is she known to be violent? Is she likely to kick off? Is there going to be some sort of mass raid to rescue her or something?
Is Marian known to be violent? She is a mother and a wife. She's been out living her life. There's been no incidents of violence at all, and there's no question to suggest that she is a risk to the public. Nothing has been offered in regards to the hearings that have been put forward.
So, am I right in reading here? She held up a piece of paper for some. I think you and obviously our listeners need to understand that these things we got to be careful how we do and say things here. But she was holding up a bit of paper, and she's been held in isolation, and it's got an armed guard holding up this bit of paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
And remember, we're paying the taxpayer who pays to the Westminster government are paying for these activities, these so-called services. And it's costing a lot of money.
I was going to say, I mean, for this case, I mean, for a woman who's she said who's 60, and presumably not very well for whatever reason, from a hunger strike and isolation. That's obviously not for me to discuss. But and I feel that they need armed guards. Is this in a mainland hospital she's in?
This is in a hospital in Belfast.
Belfast, sorry, right?
Yes, and it's important also to make the point that the Secretary of State for the British government have accepted that they found the pardon, the Royal Prerogative of Mercy, which would allow Marian to be freed. They found it, but unfortunately it was shredded. The one and only copy, a member of the government, representative government, shredded this. Now, they put that forward in court. They put it forward at what we would call a parole hearing.
Yeah. Surely
now,
if it wasn't so sad, it would be some sort of comedy.
I agree. But Marian's plight is building. People are campaigning in Ireland and in England, and I believe rightly so. Peaceful protest to highlight this human rights abuse, and this is what this is. This is a human rights abuse.
It sounds terrifying. I was after I looked it up and spoke to some mutual friends of ours. I looked it up and I thought, this is happening in a country that is meant to be one of the leaders of human rights in the world. And so this is something you'd expect to read about a third world banana republic.
It's truly shocking, and it's a secret that I'm confident not only the government at Westminster, but the Assembly in Northern Ireland would wish to keep quiet. That human rights abuses are going on at such a level that a person's liberty has been denied for in excess of a year and been held in isolation.
What is the government hoping to gain from doing this? I mean, can you answer that?
I'm at a loss because I fail to see in any civil society how our elected representatives, acting in the name of the British people, can justify the detrimental cost or what is to be achieved by locking a 60-year-old woman up.
I mean,
accepting that you shredded their license, you shredded their prerogative.
Surely, I don't know much about the system, but assuming there should be a backup of something somewhere, and there must be other proof that this license, this royal pardon, has been issued.
Yeah.
And presumably
one would think that there would be a backup, but we're going back. Marian's been released in excess of 30 years. So they've found a paper file, and they've looked through it, and their own words, yes, we found it, but we shredded it. That's their own words.
Isn't this a case of negligence on their part?
I think it's far more than negligence. I think it's vindictive. I believe it denies access to justice. Marian has a further right under Article 6 of the European Convention, which is a right to a fair trial, a right to a fair hearing. How can you have such a trial or a hearing when your accuser is saying, we've shredded the most important document of your defence.
Yeah, I'm just completely and utterly dumbfounded here, and I think our listeners probably are as well. We've got someone here who has committed a crime and been pardoned, if I'm right, in the past.
Yes.
So therefore, she served her time.
She has. The government gave her a pardon on the basis that Marian was close to death upon release due to the effect of being on hunger strike and force-fed for in excess of a year. Marian also contracted tuberculosis whilst in Armagh prison. It's a woman's prison back in the 80s. So she was very close to death. And Humphrey Atkins decided, I'm going to release her. And a week later, she was given a royal prerogative of mercy because she was dying.
And yet they seem to have gone back on this by putting her in isolation. And, well, I mean, the fact that she's in hospital, I think it probably answers my own question. It just seems that they're contradicting themselves here. I
think the government have got themselves, or the judicial system has got itself into a bit of a hole, and it's kind of how do you get out of this hole? I would suggest the answer is clear: is to release Marian Price, allow her to return home, consistent with what medical advice is saying. Listen to what the United Nations doctors are saying when they're visiting the prison. Listen to what they're saying, and they're all saying this woman should be sent home to recover her health. It seems there are cases, we always read about cases where people who seem to have committed major crimes are let off with a slap on the wrist. And this seems to be the other way round, a crime holding up a piece of paper, which is a crime. It seems to be a rather victimless crime. And yet she seemed to be suffering. I mean, I've read about this force feeding, and I was horrified about what they do. But presumably, if she's made a choice to end her life, again, I'm trying to be careful here, it's up to her, presumably. Yeah. I mean, I can't see why. Has she been declared medically insane? I think that's the only reason they can force feed someone, isn't it? If I'm thinking right. Yeah, if you don't have capacity to make a decision, then they generally have to say that you are mentally unwell to make that decision. But that's never been applied to Marian. So they've assaulted her. I mean, I was trying to find what I had written, and I can't, but it was absolutely horrifying what they've done. They tied her to a chair and rammed a gag in her mouth and shoved a funnel down there and just poured in orange juice, cups of tea and piles of cream by the sound of it. Yeah, it was the same process that was applied to another Irish prisoner called Michael Dochen, and unfortunately the tube went into his lungs, and we all know that he died as a result of that. He asphyxiated. What was his name? He couldn't tell. Michael Dochen. Dochen. Yes, okay. he couldn't tell the prison officers that they were filling his lungs because he had a gag in his mouth and a tube down his throat. Oh, he died. And was anyone punished for this or prosecuted? Or? No, because at that time Margaret Thatcher was in power, and that was a practice that was sanctioned by the Home Office to force feed people. This again. I find I'm listening to something here, babysitting out of the 1940s concentration camps, and the behaviour, treating of this woman who, to me, seems a lot more ill than that alleged bomber who was released back to Libya seems to be. Yes, the thing with Marian, that a Crown Court judge granted her bail. Now, the Crown Court judge to grant bail will determine, is this person a risk to the community if I release them? That Crown Court judge, quite a high authority, decided, well, no, she's not, and I will give her bail. Politicians then have decided, we'll recall her. I thought in this country, at least, the judges in a matter of law outranked the politicians. One would have liked to believe that, but I think the case of Marian Price is certainly suggesting otherwise. They do seem to be sticking their nose in possibly where it's not really their concern. I mean, if a Crown Court judge is, I think, the second highest, apart from the law lords in the country? Yes. Trying to think. We had Pat Ramsey of the SDLP has said that Owen Paterson is a Westminster MP who is not voted in by the people of Northern Ireland. He is in fact imposed upon the people, and he's not answerable to the people. Owen Paterson made this decision. So the people have somebody imposed upon them who is not answerable to them.
Yeah, it's again, you're just tempted to use the word dictatorship here. It's the behaviour for this of the politicians who presumably aren't, in my mind anyway, don't seem to have any authority over her, seem to be overriding their own laws. Because it's the politicians that set the laws, and they appoint these Crown Court judges who have granted bail, and the politicians seem to have said, oh well, sod this, we want her in prison again. Especially someone in her state of health.
And that is a very good summary of what has happened. And as a result, we have a 60-year-old woman with severe ill health, which has been brought on by the state, holding her in isolation. There are times Marian is so unwell due to her physical needs that she cannot even take her visits, illegal visits. She has been told, the courts have been told that Marian is unfit to stand trial. Should a trial be given the go-ahead, she is unfit to stand trial.
So if they do decide eventually to put her on trial for something that she's already been held for without trial, she can't do it anyway. So this all seems to be a complete and utter waste of time. And
it's a waste of time, absolutely.
And again, as I said just now, if it wasn't so serious, this is something that it's almost like the Keystone Cops. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact you've got one poor woman here who's probably going to die, God help her, and held without trial. I mean, this is something out of some 1984 George Orwellian thing.
It is, and I mean, I'm grateful, having read the reports, and I listened to your radio show on Monday, that there are people in England who had protests in 4 key cities when the Olympic torch came by, highlighting the case of Marian Price, because I believe the people in England are not aware of the case of Marian Price. They're not aware of what the government is doing in their name. And I think it must be highlighted.
I read up after I spoke to the people who highlighted it to me. I did some reading up, and I was, again, absolutely shocked, and I was so pleased when you got hold of us to talk about it. And speaking for me, and I think for Mike as well, we're going to make sure that we raise this case and create a holy hell over it. So I think it needs to be noticed, because I think the government like to work in secrecy. There's a lot of things going on in this country at the moment that they don't want the light of publicity shined on. But
absolutely.
And is there any details or information I can pass on to people who want to get hold of? So, like, this is our friend. This is another presenter called Charlie Skinner.
Is any of the emergency laws still in place in Northern Ireland?
No, they're not. There's no emergency legislation.
Not now.
No, they've all been repealed by way of the what's called the Good Friday Agreement, which is the Northern Ireland Act.
Could use that against their emergency laws, see.
Yeah. Yes, but it's important to note that the Westminster government still has terrorist legislation in place.
Yes.
But there's no such emergency provisions available within Northern Ireland.
Have you got any details, Mr. Pook, so people who are listening can support Mrs. Price?
I don't have them to hand, but what I can do, I can email the show and give you the details, and maybe you could put them out after the show. Okay,
yes, and obviously I can, yes, if you can do that, and I think you might have my email address as well.
I do, yes.
Yes, if you want to email me as well, and we'll get them out, and I'll get them out probably on our Monday show as well.
That's great, and thanks to the Source FM for highlighting this issue. It's the one and only shows that has done so, and I am grateful, and on behalf of the Price family, they've asked me to express their thanks and gratitude to you.
Well, you tell them that their fight will not be forgotten, and maybe we'll speak to you or some of the members of the Price family again in the near future.
Thank you for having us.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for being
Thank you very much now, and goodbye. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not quite sure what to say, where I can use words that I'm not allowed to use on radio. But frankly, I'm disgusted. I could have been speaking about someone in some third world hellhole there, but we're not. We're speaking about the United Kingdom. My dad, who died at 96 a couple of years ago, served in the Second World War, and he once said, friends of mine died to give the right to people to speak their minds. Now, Mrs. Price has served her sentence, has been pardoned for what she did. I'm not in any way condoning violence or terrorism. Don't try to think that we're trying to support terrorist acts. We are not. What we hear on One and All, on Hubbardullier, on anywhere, is that you've got a woman in her 60s, incredibly ill health, that's been proven by medical specialists, saying she cannot stand trial. Sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional here, ladies and gentlemen. And she's being treated like this. Well, I think I'd better go to a song, and I'm in a bit of an Irish mood at the moment, so I'm going to play a song called Out in the Streets by, can't think, Phil Lynott and Gary Moore. Have a listen and come back after this song. It's Phil Lynott and Gary Moore, and Out in the Streets, a song I think that points out that violence is not the answer. Sorry, if you tuned in, you've been listening about Marian Price. I've been speaking to her lawyer, Mr. Pook, and it's shocking, absolutely shocking, that you've got the current government, and possibly the previous government, interfering with a woman who has been pardoned, and they've gone and shredded her pardon, which to me is just gross incompetence, and they're treating her like some sort of mass murderer, got her into isolation, doing things to her, to me, that are inhuman. And the government are trying to keep this quiet, like so many other things these days. Well, I said I'm in an Irish music mood, and Irish music mood. And last night I dug up a song by Simple Minds called Belfast Child. Now, I've heard a number of reasons what this song was about. I think the songwriter said he wrote it after the Enniskillen bombing, an awful occurrence during the Troubles. But music is an art form, I find, and all art is in the eye of the beholder. Someone clever said that, it wasn't me. But the interpretation of this song is, I feel, it's about peace, about the Belfast Child singing again, and I think peace will not happen until the occupied territories are no longer occupied and return to their own country. I feel every nation has a right to govern itself. As with some nations, if they've suffered natural disasters or for whatever reason they need help, they should be given help. This happens in the third world countries, but Ireland is a strong, long-term, powerful nation in its own right. So it should have the right to govern its whole nation, not just 3/4 of it. And I feel, my personal opinion is the English army should get out of Northern Ireland, the north of Ireland. They have no right to be there, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Don't know, you tell me. You give us a ring. Give us a ring on 01209 698 00. 698 005. So, as I said, I'm sitting here speaking my voice, and you've got a right to speak yours. Bit more music, then I'm going to change the mood a little bit and come over to the Sheriff of RedRuth here, Charlie, and talk about some of the music he plays on his show. Yeah. But here we go. This is Belfast Child, lovely song by Simple Minds, one I haven't heard of for a while.